I'm Sara Payne Scarbro, co-founder of the West Virginia Grant Resource Centers. Welcome to our new online series, Resource Roundup. We created this platform to help facilitate partnerships and connections to experts and resources so you can level up your next project. Today, I'm speaking with two leaders in community development. They work to support the Rural Investment Collaborative. It's an initiative operated by the Richmond Fed. I actually serve on the collaborative's steering committee, so I get to see firsthand all the inspiring work they do for rural America and all the technical support their team provides. I'm thrilled to host Peter and Jason today to discuss their community investment training program. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining me here today. Please take a few minutes to introduce yourselves and the Rural Investment Collaborative and its projects. Hi, Peter. We'll start with you.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you for this opportunity. So my name is Peter Dolkart. I'm on the community development team of the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond. I'm joined by my colleague, Jason Smith, and it is our pleasure to talk about our Rural Investment Collaborative. So just quickly, the views and opinions expressed herein are those of the presenters and do not represent an official position of the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond or the Federal Reserve System. Now, the Richmond Fed does not fund or otherwise award grants, participate in the selection of grantees, or the selection of the communities that are selected or receiving the training or technical assistance. So just quickly, an overview. The Federal Reserve is the central bank of the United States. It includes the Board of Governors, which is a federal agency located in Washington, D.C., and 12 Federal Reserve banks around the nation. The Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, or what we just call the Richmond Fed, is one of those banks. And as you can see on the map, we work across 5 states, South Carolina up through Maryland, and including West Virginia. So at the Richmond Fed, we are driven by our public service mission to strengthen the economy and our communities across our region. And the Rural Investment Collaborative is one of our primary tools to do that. So our particular focus, both in this initiative and as the Federal Reserve Bank, is to address low and moderate income communities and also rural areas. So if you look at this map, and you can see that West Virginia is in the upper left corner, essentially, West Virginia has a large concentration of low and moderate income communities and is predominantly a rural state. So let's talk about the Rural Investment Collaborative. Our goal is to work in both small towns and in rural communities. So the basic problem we're trying to address with this initiative is both a supply and demand issue that creates barriers to capital access, basically funding, in rural areas. So on the supply side, some sources of capital or funding are frankly missing. And those that do exist are just not well coordinated. Now, on the demand side, rural regions have fewer people who can develop strong projects even when investment is available and ready. So to describe the initiative in further detail, I'm going to turn it over to Jason. Jason?
Hi, I'm Jason Smith. I'm the Senior Community Development Advisor for the Richmond Fed and help to oversee the Rural Investment Collaborative. And I look forward to giving you a little bit more overview about an opportunity that is currently available. Applications through August 20th, so a short turnaround, but looking forward to applications this year and next year from West Virginia, and hope that you'll help us find the communities that should be applying for this opportunity, whether that's you or someone else. First, I want to make sure I acknowledge some of our key partners. As Peter said, that we don't provide grants, but the steering group has raised funds that are held at the Appalachian Community Capital that they do distribute and in support of some of the graduates of this program. I also want to acknowledge Invest Appalachia, who provides the content for the curriculum that we'll be discussing in the next few slides. So I just also want to make sure you know who your team is as you're considering to apply. I oversee the initiative overall. And if you have questions that are specific to your application, or if you're in the training, you'll get to meet Shannon Sansone, who is our project manager, who provides a lot of the coordination support for the effort. Of course, Peter, who you've met, who serves particularly the West Virginia and Maryland markets of our service area. So he would be a point of contact also if you had questions. And then our partners over at Invest Appalachia on the training are Andrew Crossan and Paul Wright. Paul is the person who facilitates the training during the sessions. So this training is intended to address some key gaps that are there. As Peter said, there are less people who are trained to be able to take a great idea, to build on the assets your community has, and to be able to turn them into something that is investment ready, or that a person who's looking to make a return on their investment, or who would be deciding to do tax credits or other larger contributions would need to see in order for them to want to make that investment. And so, in the process of looking at the overall process of going from seeing a great opportunity to spot it in your community and think, wow, wouldn't it be great if we had a hotel? We're a tourism location, but we don't have a place for people to stay, or some other project that might be spotted. Then someone actually has to frame that project up. In other words, they have to describe it in a way that is something that an investor would believe in. And then they usually hand that off to someone who can package the deal. And it continues to go through additional steps until the funding is actually structured and it is underwritten either for loans or for the grants that may come through tax credits or other sources of funding. But this project and this training really focuses on helping that community have someone that not only can spot the project, but can really describe it through that framing process. Here on this slide, we have several West Virginia graduates as well as graduates from other states. We've had 42 people go through the training and be graduates so far. And I'm going to share more about what they've experienced in hopes that you may consider it yourself. So the community investment training is a 4-month training. It is all virtual. It is provided for 2 to 2.5 hours every Monday. And then in between the Monday sessions virtually, there are homework assignments that usually take 1 to 2 hours a week where you're actually working on a real project that is in your community. So all of the work that you're doing isn't just book learning, it is really you moving your project forward. So in order to apply, people have to have a real community development project that is going to benefit their community, whether that's for profit or nonprofit in nature, but it has to include investment types beyond grants. After they go through developing their project throughout the 16-week course, the last sessions are to actually practice pitching it. Now, this isn't a pitch like Shark Tank where people are really coming out with their teeth on. This is a project, a pitch session where you get to hear back feedback from Invest Appalachia, from Fed staff, and from work group members who have some background in this area, who we basically put on different hats. We respond as if we might be a lender, or we might be a foundation, or we might be a tax credit or a private investor. And we say, well, as I listen to your pitch, if you are presenting to this type of audience, here's some things we might want to see that we didn't hear in your presentation, or here's something that maybe could be explained a little better or differently. So the feedback during the pitch session is really to help people continue to move their projects forward. And there are no funders in the room, so it's a much lower stake. After graduating, all of the graduates of the program, which means that you complete all of the training courses and that you attend the pitch sessions, receive a $2,000 mini grant. We know that that's not a lot of money, but the intent from the steering group is really to make sure that there are opportunities to keep the project moving by bringing the community together, maybe accessing a little additional training, going to some form of a session that would help you move forward more deeply into one of the topics. And that's just a small contribution that everyone's guaranteed to receive as long as they come to the sessions and pitch. After that, the graduates become eligible for 2 other types of funding. One is technical assistance grants, and these are usually between $10,000 and $20,000, depending on what type of pre-development support, like engineering or architectural studies, might be needed. And then finally, about a year after the graduation, once the project's really had a little time to mature and develop, then we have an opportunity through the steering group that people can apply towards for implementation grants, and that's a larger amount than the technical assistance grants. So those are some of the resource opportunities, but there's also the networking that comes from this. We hear over and over how much people appreciate being able to meet people who are doing similar projects from other states and continuing to learn from them. But we also have opportunities for people to receive some kind of just-in-time training or education that relates to their projects. So for instance, when the graduates are having an opportunity to apply for technical assistance, The procurement team at the Richmond Federal Reserve and other partners provide a webinar on how do you select vendors, or communications best practices. And so those are some of the types of things that the alumni network does, other than just being able to continue to maintain and build relationships between the participants. So before I get into the details of the program, I just want to share a little bit more about the outcomes so far. So far, we've had 18 graduates in the first cohort and 24 in the second, for a total of 42 people have completed the training. As you can see here, have a decent representation from West Virginia, with most of them though being from southern West Virginia. And so really hoping people will consider other areas and make sure the word gets out to places where there are low and moderate income communities that may not have heard about the opportunity yet. To date, there's also been $437,000 of funding allocated by the steering group to people who graduated from the program. And that's primarily to the first cohort, who is a little further along in the process. But we also find that people have opportunities to connect to other resources. For instance, one of the sessions that you'll hear about in just a second is about how to access technical assistance and other supports. And one of the people that provided that presentation the last 2 years was Opportunity Appalachia. And some of the people in the session then applied to Opportunity Appalachia, and over 150,000 of technical assistance was received directly through them that didn't have to come through the steering group. But we've also had people who applied for implementation funds and may not have been able to receive it, who were able to then go on and find other funding. So we have had some one of the West Virginia applicants received an EPA grant after going through the training. All told, 600,000 has been raised, and maybe a little more than that at this point, in order to help support the different programs. And the steering group continues to work on that on the behalf of people who will apply. So what kind of projects are we talking about? Again, I mentioned that it does need to be something that is more than a grant driven program. So this isn't for like program operations, and it's not for things that will exclusively be funded by grants. There are great grant writing organizations out there. Glad to be here on the call for this. And then there are also other types of projects that require additional funding of other types. And so this is really focused on those that might need those tax credits, business loans, private investors, in addition to usually they do have grants too. So those types of projects usually have some form of land or structure. And so Main Street revitalization projects have been a big theme for the people who've applied and be successful. Workforce housing has been another area, small business incubation centers, and then other community amenities and workforce training and infrastructure have also been some of the parts where they have a revenue opportunity. So I'm going to give you one specific example from right over the state line in Clifton Forge, Virginia. And this is a community that started off finding out about this program because their foundation in Allegheny was able to provide funding for the town to buy 2 buildings on their main street. The problem was that these buildings were in fairly bad disrepair, and they weren't ready for a private investor to be willing to come in and purchase them and make use of them. And so in order to do that, they needed to go through some steps of pre-development support and to be able to stabilize the structures, particularly the roofs, in order for people to be ready to move in with their business or their nonprofit. And so they didn't have somebody that worked for the town that had the training to do some of that work. But together, the town and the foundation identified a person who happened to be a lawyer who was working as a nonprofit director for a program in the arts, who they believed, if they had the training, could really do this type of work. And so they went out to Katie and asked her whether she would consider applying to the community investment training. And Katie did. And so today, after going through this program and learning about this work, she's one of the ones that received about 70,000 in Opportunity Appalachia technical assistance, an additional 20,000 from the steering group, and then they received an implementation grant to help that project move forward. And I've been told that this first building has even been sold to someone who's going to put a restaurant in it while they continue to do some work on the second one. So people wear many different types of hats when they come to this training, but what they mostly all have in common is that they've usually only written maybe a few grants or have had a personal car or home loan, but they haven't gone into more business loans and tax credits and more complex investment structures. So who should apply? It isn't based on title. We've had people from county administrators, we've had Parks and Rec staff from West Virginia, we've had people who are mayors, but we've also had people who are nonprofit leaders, people who are working for a foundation that is trying to build the place-based work in a community. We've also had private investors who've gone through the training in partnership with others from the community that to do work that's part of a community plan. So what we're looking for really is someone who can help to move a project forward. And, that person who's that catalyst in a community for seeing an opportunity and helping the community thrive by moving that project forward can be a lot of different people, but they need to have that decision and making authority in order to move something forward on behalf of the organization or the community. Here's some of the session topics you can expect to hear. These are the core sessions. There is a pre-session that we started off making optional, but have found it to be so beneficial that we've made it be a requirement. And that's an overview of community development finance. So in university terms, it's like community development finance one-on-one. So the training starts off with that because we expect that people are coming into this without much, if any, knowledge of all the words and concepts that are going to be heard. It really is starting from the beginning. And so that CD Finance 101 just provides a level set of the foundations that someone needs to know. And it helps also with everyone getting to know each other and realizing you're not in it alone. You're not the only person that this is new to them. Then you go into the next session, which really covers the basics. So it talks about the skills a framer needs in order to develop the project as a whole, but also how do you form a team, because this isn't the type of work that most people do completely by themselves. After that, it goes into more of the context of the work, talking about the systems and the approach to the work and why that approach matters, and to really understand the larger landscape. After that, it digs in a little bit deeper into who some of the main actors or stakeholders are that you have to be aware of, and then why do you need to work with them, and what products might they offer to help advance your project. Then it moves more into the financials. So the next course is really an overview of the financials elements of an investment and what it takes to make a project investable. And then after that, there are three more that are more specific to specific types of projects that people might be engaging in. So there's an opportunity to learn specifically about business lending for the projects that are more focused on starting a business or increasing a business. Then there's one for downtown revitalization and downtown redevelopment, and some of the opportunities for different products that are helpful for that financial package. And then some that are more for social enterprises. So here you have more of mission-driven work that may be like nonprofits or foundations work that are going to involve some form of a return on investment or some form of an income that allows it to be open to more than just grants. Finally, I've mentioned this one or two times. There's the opportunity then to look at what are some of the different technical assistance supports. These are things like architectural renderings, engineering studies, the historic property studies, and other forms of technical assistance that may be needed to get a project to go through. And finally, as we said, this is just one step in the process. You have to have a person who can spot the opportunity and a person who can write it up and describe it in a way that someone says, okay, I see why that would be investable. And then there's usually another person that is part of the team that helps to actually pull that financial package together. And so it really starts to look at how do you start to hand that off, or how do you engage with others to help you in the process of putting together the full prospectus. And then the last sessions are, again, around pitching the project for feedback. So as we look to recruit in the 2026 cohort, we're really looking again, anyone can apply that is in a rural community or small town, but there is a specific interest in making sure low and moderate income communities are able to apply. And so helping to get the word out there would be helpful. Local anchor organizations often help to provide some form of sponsorship or acknowledgement that the work that is being done is related to something that is of the community's interest. This could be a chamber, it could be a United Way, a foundation, it could be an organization like a hospital system that has a community health needs assessment, but something that helps to show that this project does build on the interests of the community, and it's not just something that's going to benefit an individual who's going through the training. And finally, if there are opportunities to connect to state or other national and priorities for investment or momentum, then that's even better. So that is the core part of our contact. I've got Peter's email here, and Shannon Sansone, I mentioned, is the project lead. Those would be the first people probably to engage with as you consider applying. And now I think we're going to take a few moments to answer some questions. And thank you again, Sarah, for having us and letting us join you and share with your communities.
Well, I just really appreciate your time and Peter's time. I mean, this is just an excellent program, and I think what impressed me so much is that you meet the clients where they're at in the process, right? I mean, we all have our strengths and weaknesses. Some may know about the financial, but some maybe that needs the communications help. And so I just love how this program gives access to support on many different levels. Just a couple questions. One, government, for profit, nonprofit, they can all apply. How long, like how far along in the process on your project do you need to be, really to say, okay, I'm ready to like apply for this opportunity? Can you give just a couple like tidbits there?
Yeah, I'm glad to. I'll take this one. It's important for the project to be well defined. I mean, so you don't want to have just thought of it and apply for this program and get in because in true adult learning, it really is best for a person to have a real project that they're working through. So something that is defined, which means that you have an idea of the business case, that there is a need for it, and others see the need for it. And then the second is that it does need to have the opportunity for investment beyond grants. And you have to be open to that. So if it comes in looking like it's operations to the project development work group and then the steering group for review for acceptance, and it just looks like operations or that it's only going to be funded by grants, then it won't be able to move forward with the process. But it's also important that there be project community partners that are already involved. And so again, being able to tie to that community development plan or that at least that others are saying, hey, this is an important part of us leveraging our local strengths as a community or addressing needs, so that you have that backing. A letter of support is required from one of those types of organizations to apply. And finally, it's really helpful if possible to have site control, but we understand that's not always possible because you need to understand the funding to get it. So at least having an idea of what property you might be considering so that when you're working through, the sources and the uses of money, you can put more realistic numbers behind it, even if it doesn't end up being the actual property that is the final property. It at least lets you go through the learning opportunities with something real in mind.
So, can you talk a little bit about the application process itself? Like, how long is it? Is it pretty tedious? Like, you mentioned the letter of support. Are there other materials that you would have to attach in this review process?
We've tried to make sure that the questions are fairly straightforward, both for the applicant and for the reviewers. So we know that there will be a lot of applications coming in. So most of the word limits per question are between 100 and 250 words. Reasonable length responses. And
Yeah,
we provide
absolutely.
examples of the project narrative, like with different types of programs, and say, like if you're going to describe your project in 4 sentences, here's 2 or 3 examples for you. And then when you get into the later questions, they're also not asking you for in-depth information on financials. I mean, that's why the course is there. So the most important thing is for people to address. I think it's about 10 to 12 questions in a concise way that is clear, and that shares and puts the best foot forward for your community.
Yeah, no, that's completely reasonable. It sounds like a pretty streamlined process. Where do you access the application? Is it on your website?
It is. So if people go to the Richmond Federal Reserve website and then they click on the region and communities, or just put in the search engine when you put it up, the Rural Investment Collaborative, it's fairly well optimized to be able to get you there pretty quickly. There's a call out box that talks about the community investment training, and it has an apply here button. But there's also flyers that describe the program again, and also what to think about for readiness or eligibility to apply. And there's even a testimonial video that right now is somebody from West Virginia you can hear. I realize, Sarah, I didn't answer one of your last questions. The other thing that is required in addition to the application is that letter of support from some organization that could be your own, but it also could be a chamber or United Way or other types of community-based organizations. That's particularly important if it is a for-profit organization, but it's required for everyone. And then the other opportunity is it's not required, but it is encouraged if people do have any site development plans or strategic plans that this project is mentioned in, they can upload that as well.
That's great. And how many organizations do you think that will be selected for this cohort?
Well, I can address that. So we're looking to select 25 organizations, 25 participants in the upcoming cohort across our 5 states. We find that number is a good number because it allows enough interactivity among the members of the class to ask questions, participate in small discussion groups online. And it's a manageable number. So for West Virginia, since we do want to kind of spread that 25 across those 5 states, optimally, we're looking for about 4 to 6 organizations to participate in 2026 in West Virginia. That's not a hard and fast rule. We'll look at it based off of the proportionality of applications, but that's essentially it. 25 in total, optimally 4 to 6 from West Virginia. I should say, though, and we certainly encourage as many applications as possible from every state, including West Virginia, that it often has been the case in the last 2 years that somebody who did submit for one particular year, but they didn't make that 25-person cut, we've encouraged them to apply again, and they often have gotten in the next year. So even if you don't make the cut this year, it's worth go ahead and put in the application. Tell us who you are, what you're about, what you're trying to accomplish. We'll remember it if not for this year, for another year.
No, I think that's fantastic. And so, everyone, you're hearing that West Virginia has some seats available, and we encourage you to put your applications in to be part of this great program. Really, I think that's all my questions that I really had, except, in addition to this program, are there any other resources that you would like to take a minute and share with the viewers today?
Yeah, well, we do put out a number of different initiatives and products that are available across our district, including in West Virginia. We do any number of publications, both economic articles as well as spotlights on various best practices in communities. That can be found on the Richmond Fed website. We also do a conference every year called Investing in Rural America. It's usually in May. In fact, we've been using this conference this past year as a graduation ceremony for the people who graduated in that year's cohort, and a kind of a way for people to meet each other in person. So we have our conference. We do a number of other initiatives looking at things like the benefits cliff impact when people are in part of various support and welfare programs, and at what point do they need to anticipate where their income may actually make them ineligible, and how do they prepare for that? And actually, I know this is a set time reviewing, but in September 3rd, we'll be in Morgantown for what we call district dialogues, where we will actually have a conversation on this very topic, a panel conversation in person and online on how to overcome the barriers in investing in rural communities, which is exactly what this initiative seeks to address.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Jason, do you have anything to add on that?
I think Peter has covered that. I think that we're just excited about the opportunities to apply. Like Peter said, even if you aren't accepted, we through the steering group and the other work groups try to connect people to some of the other organizations in your area to be able to help you continue to strengthen your project idea before the opportunity to apply again. We do encourage people of many different types, whether it's a public or a nonprofit and even for-profit organizations. communities. A couple of just real quick examples from West Virginia is we have had people that worked on a private building development for real estate in order to do rental properties. It was eligible because they were working with their local United Way to provide wraparound services. And so one was looking at the housing component, the other one was looking at the wraparound services in order to make that happen. Another one of the private ones in West Virginia was a hotel deal, but it was a community that did not have lodging. And they, as part of their strategic plan for the county, knew they needed to bring that into this town. And so a private investor went through the training looking at how to do a hotel deal. But we've also had people go through the project, making other types of investments. Victor Farmer in Boone is coming from a healthcare organization, and their healthcare and hospital is investing in a main street, and so their project involved really bringing a building back to life in the main street for housing for doctors and nurses on the top floor and community spaces on the bottom floor. At the same time, they were relocating some of their billing offices and other things downtown to really make a concentrated effort to have that main street thrive. And that really brings us to that last point, and that's that we do want people to have one successful project, absolutely. But we hope that some of the people going through this training will also go through it and be able to think about multiple projects in a community that add up to more than they would if they just did one. So with this, you apply with one project, you may mention another one in your application, but you go through it really focused on one. But we're really hoping to build that local capacity and community so they can keep on doing this work long after the training ends.
I mean, that's well said. I mean, with the Grant Resource Center, we find that you just got to get started. And it doesn't matter how big or small, once you get in the game, right, and you develop a project and you make it competitive and you submit and maybe you get that first grant and maybe it's $5,000, it's a game changer. It can really start you on the path of seeking additional funding and other projects, and it really can change the landscape of a community. So I think this is an excellent program, and I appreciate Peter, your time, and Jason, your time for joining us today. And hopefully, you will receive a lot of applications from West Virginians. And so we will do our part to promote this. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.